Yes, it's the Kaleidoscope of Facts. Our international research team continues to disclose little-known pages of humans' chronicles. As you'll see, we've slightly changed the format. Now, we are going to talk about our discoveries through documentaries. Dear viewers, the group has entrusted me to deliver the results of this work to you. My name is Robert. You can address any questions regarding the materials of Kaleidoscope of Facts to me using email displayed on the screen. As before, we go live on the 13th of each month. Today, we will partially reveal the secret of the rapid leap forward that humanity could have made in the early 20th century. Who held back the progress at that time? How not to repeat the mistakes of the past today when we are standing at the finish line? Are you ready to discover the truth? Well, let's go. Scientific and technological progress is a multifaceted process that covers all aspects of society. And first of all, this is a process of qualitative changes of means of production, tools of labor, production technologies, and management. It has always been this way. Now let's look at how this process took place in the 19th century, how it reached its peak, and why it eventually stopped. In those distant years, when electric generators did not exist yet, and science did not discover the principles of controlling electricity, there were already challenges related to its application. One of such tasks was the illumination of cities. Few people know that during the coronation of Alexander I, Kremlin Cathedral Square was illuminated in the most fantastic manner. Naturally, there could be no photography at that time. This technology would only emerge 3 decades later. Thanks to the urban landscape master Fyodor Alexeyev, details of this event have reached us.
Fyodor Alexeyev was the first master of urban landscapes in Russian painting. He traveled extensively, capturing views of provincial towns across Russia, as well as St. Petersburg and Moscow. Architecture played a significant role in his cityscapes, and as an artist, Fyodor Alexeyev had an exceptional eye for even the tiniest details. That's why examining his paintings is particularly fascinating today. They serve as a kind of documentary, reflection of reality. One of his paintings, dedicated to the coronation of Alexander I on September 15, 1801, is of particular interest to us. Although the photograph of the event emerged only 3 decades later, this painting allows us to truly appreciate the scale of the spectacular light show organized for this occasion. Today, we don't know how the Kremlin illumination was arranged at a time when electricity was still officially undiscovered. However, we cannot dismiss this artwork as mere artistic imagination, considering Alexeyev's meticulous attention to detail. Everything becomes clear when you read the memoirs of Ivan Alexeyevich Vitorov, a Russian official, judge, educator, and writer. The ceremony finished at about 2 or 3 a.m. In the evening of the same day, the entire city was illuminated. Shields with lit firepots and colorful lanterns were placed in front of houses on every street. All churches were also illuminated with firepots, especially Ivan the Great Bell Tower. A dazzling display of lights from its base to the top across illuminated the dark night. Above its dome, a crown made of colorful lanterns was displayed. The walls of the tower and the buildings throughout the Kremlin were also illuminated. The whole of Moscow presented an extraordinary and beautiful sight. We rode through the streets for a long time, enjoying the spectacle of various illuminations and the bustling crowds. Many houses were illuminated from bottom to rooftop with firepots and lanterns. Particularly, the Pashkov house, with both wings and the garden, was ablaze. From the top of its belvedere to the peaks of the wings, fiery garlands were strung. The Kremlin was teeming with countless people of all genders. All the squares resembled brightly lit rooms. Opposite the Kremlin Palace, on the other side of the Moscow River, a massive shield was lit up. The view was breathtaking from elevated spots within the Kremlin, observing the illuminated surroundings.
That cities in the 19th century were illuminated by gas lanterns. Gas lamps were also used inside houses. At least, that's what we used to think. Now take a look at the architectural structure of that time, particularly at those bases. Many assume that it is not just decoration. Supporters of the official history refer to these vases as urns for the ashes of the deceased or just decoration. However, alternative historians suppose that these vases are related to atmospheric electricity. According to one of the most common theories, the vases contained mercury. It's worth mentioning that identical vases are found on the historical buildings all over the world.
It is quite remarkable that mercury played an important role in the 19th century. During that time, it was used in certain lighting devices. Information about the use of mercury can be found in an article from the 1888 issue of the Scientific American magazine. Buoy systems typically relied on long-burning lamps, phosphorus mixtures, electric illuminators, and luminescent paint for their operation. However, at this stage we are interested in mercury. According to one theory, the principle of the buoy's operation was based on generating electricity by putting mercury into motion in glass tubes in a circular path. The buoy's oscillations caused the mercury to move along the tubes and, according to a principle that remains unknown to this day, generate electricity for their illumination.
Any stage of the development of equipment and technology happens after science explores new horizons of knowledge. In the 19th century, such horizons were the theory of electricity and the theory of gases, which led to the creation of steam engines. Discovering the laws of electricity allowed humanity to take the next leap in its development. The cities of the early and late 19th century changed fundamentally. In 100 years, the technological way of life changed completely. Cities were entangled with wires, streetcar rails, and illuminated with electricity.
Magazines widely advertised steam engines for electricity generation. Electric motors of almost any power became available for purchase. The telephone and telegraph became everyday items in households. Many other things emerged, the existence of which city dwellers could not even imagine. Such was the advancement of technological progress over just one century.
To this day, the most convenient and widespread form of urban transportation is considered to be the electric tram, fast, reliable, and environmentally friendly. And how many interesting stories are associated with it? Do you know what the very first trams were like? And when did they first appear?
It's amusing to observe the self-moving little trams of the late 19th century. Gliding along without overhead wires or a third rail below, they move effortlessly without puffing away. But they should. After all, if not electricity, then steam and wood should have powered them. Yet, they are absent. There's certainly no steam and smoke in sight. Of course, the first thing that comes to mind is that electric current could be supplied through the rails. However, firstly, bulky transformers converters were needed. Plus, it was costly. The lion's share of energy was simply lost, even over a short distance. For instance, in modern subways, special technologies are applied to deliver voltage to the rails as the train approaches. By the way, that's why some early tram lines also had a third power rail in the middle. Just think. We still use these technologies to this day.
It's impossible to give a definite answer here, because we need to consider different types of trams. And there were many types: double-deckers, single-deckers, small and large. But there are even videos where trams are moving without horses, without wires, without any kind of current collectors. Unlike our trams, which ran and are still running, there must be wires there. There are many inconsistencies, such as how do they run? What are they running on? At the same time, there are photos where current collectors are already present, where they install some other poles and stretch wires. It means trams were of absolutely different types. Now we know that trams are only of one type, with wires. And there is this mast there that connects to the power grid, right? But then, why do we see that there is no power grid as such? Here again, we remember our 19th century energy capabilities, that it was extensive and mostly wireless. Accordingly, etheric generators were installed on trams, on their roofs. We can even call them mini-domes. I think they could operate as self-contained, autonomous sources, if there was enough power from such a generator, or if they were connected, for instance, to the wireless electricity network of these poles. And there was a lot of energy there, as much as you want. I mean, a vast field was created. Naturally, they were powered from there if there was not enough power. This is my personal opinion, and that's why they could move. Also, there is such a moment when Tesla's generator is in operation, and if we connect to it a simple small motor through copper coils following a certain scheme, well, I won't delve into the details now, you just need a certain simple scheme and you should know the number of coils. And so you just need to tune them so this resonance frequency, so to speak, to wind it, to charge it. And then the motor will work. It'll start spinning, that's it. Therefore, trams were of different types. There are also videos chronicles where it is shown how a tram is charged with water. This means there was some other technology, for example, engines on water. Why not? If electric cars were already in full swing in the 19th century, then in the early 20th century there was a mass production of electric cars. But in this case, apparently, there was a battery-based charging system. It turns out that at some point in time, there were several technologies, which was actually good, since there were ample options. Interestingly, though, during this very time frame, we can also see for some reason horse-drawn transport over some period. It's really surprising. There are also some cases when in one photo there is a self-driving tram without any visible poles or antennas, and right next to it there is a horse-drawn transport. Apparently there was some transition period, or maybe something broke down, stopped working. Or maybe it was a time when it was being destroyed. This theory also holds weight. And for some time they rode horses for some reason. Poor horses, it must have been so hard for them. But let's just grab the point. They constructed a tram network, built all these communication lines, and then used horses for propulsion. Well, it sounds a little absurd, if not crazy, right? Why go through the trouble? They could simply employ carts and carriage pulled by horses instead. Why use poor horses? There are even videos where a double-decker tram is pulled by horses. Well, how is that? It will get tired. And what for? It's not clear, you see? Anyway, what I was trying to explain to you now is that there were most likely many types of technologies, and even electric engines or motors. It turns out that the industry was developed in this regard. So it's amazing that at that time this electric engineering part was so remarkably developed, and it was truly diverse.
During these years, there were many miraculous trams, such as the pneumatic tram, diesel-powered tram, and accumulator tram. However, the seagoing railway, known as the Daddy Long Legs, stood unparalleled. It was something in between a tram, a ferry, and a vessel. Also worthy of attention were the automotive pneumatic marvels. Among them was the noiseless, horseless carriage called the Hoadley, which was capable of a 15-mile-per-hour top speed and a range of a whopping 20 miles. At that time, at the turn of the century, the development of pneumatic technologies was occurring in various directions. Another marvel of technical ingenuity that has survived since then is the vertical pneumatic lifts. They operated on the same principle that today we present as the basis for the functioning of future elevators. These century-old elevators were made with such quality that some of them are still operational. For example, in St. Petersburg. Even in our time, the pneumatic mail system is still in use. It is employed in banks and laboratories to transport documents and samples. One example of how past technologies are still in use is the Wuppertal Suspension Railway, which has no equals in the world. It was constructed and launched back in the distant year of 1902 and continues to function, significantly easing the transportation flow of the city.
Such videos evoke the feeling that we live in some unknown parallel reality, parallel to the path that we should have taken. As for the modern transportation, cars have undoubtedly become more powerful, comfortable, smarter, but there haven't been any fundamental changes. We still rely on internal combustion engines, and the air of our cities is becoming mercilessly polluted by exhaust fumes. Why do you think we were switched to motorized transportation?
A typical example of how technologies were concealed is the campaign initiated by General Motors to destroy trams and replace them with automobiles. By the 1920s, General Motors' car sales had started to decline rapidly. The company's vice president, Alfred Sloan, concluded that the automobile market was saturated and that everyone who wanted to buy a car had already done so. Therefore, further market development seemed impossible. It was then that he made a strategic move in a capitalist-like approach to eliminate electric trams, which had become a major hindrance to the expansion of the car market. In the United States, by the beginning of the 20th century, almost every town with a population of over 2,500 people had its own electric railway system. Moreover, tram lines connected a vast number of cities with each other. It was the favored and affordable means of transportation for Americans. An astounding fact is that the longest continuous route spanned over 1,500 kilometers. Some may even say that could be speed driving, as the average intercity tram speed reached 130 kilometers per hour. For a while, tram companies and auto giants managed to coexist and develop peacefully. But General Motors organized a huge campaign to destroy electric transport. This is evident from a report by U.S. Senate advisor Bradford Snell in 1974, which presented evidence that from 1936 to 1950, General Motors, together with Firestone Tire, Standard Oil of California, and Phillips Petroleum, created holding companies to acquire tram lines and subsequently eliminated them. The methods employed included direct threats, blackmail, deception, and bribery of officials, utilizing extensive contacts in ruling and banking circles. As a result of this monopolistic diversion, trams were soon replaced almost everywhere with puffing, slow buses. General Motors was the very manufacturer of these buses, and the inconvenient schedules, cramped and stuffy cabins forced well-off citizens to purchase private cars. For violating antitrust legislation, the company was fined a mere $5,000, while each of the heads of the shell companies was fined $1. The trams disappeared from almost all cities very quickly. Alfred Sloan's actions turned out to be successful for the company's development and made him a hero. He even appeared on the cover of the Time magazine in 1926. But did he become a hero from the perspective of technological progress?
And this is where it makes sense to wonder why progress stopped. What or who stopped it? In the process of research, it became clear that from the very beginning of history known to us, there has been an amazing cyclical pattern of events with a period of somewhere around 100 years. Let's take, for example, the year 1918. During World War I, an epidemic of a mysterious Spanish flu took the lives of about 100 million people. Then a massive famine followed. The war resulted in the reshaping of territories and the dissolution of four empires: German, Russian, Austro-Hungarian, and Ottoman. Throughout history, one pattern has remained consistent, a pattern well known in the consumerist format of society: epidemic, war, famine. Doesn't this remind you of anything? Over the past 70 years, there have been no fundamental discoveries in the field of natural sciences. There are many reasons for this, but the main one lies in the intensive development of consumer society. You may have a different opinion, but let's take a look at how it happened. What have you heard, for example, about the world exhibitions of the 19th century? There were many of them, held at different times and in different countries. We will look at just a few of them.
Paris, the year 1889. For example, in 1889, the World's Fair was held in Paris. The famous Eiffel Tower served as the entrance arc to the exhibition grounds, which was initially intended to be dismantled after the event. Typically, after the conclusion of an exhibition, its exhibits were taken down. However, the Eiffel Tower remained standing to this day and has become the iconic symbol of Paris. Architects of the pavilions, eager to glimpse into the future, competed with each other in the utopianism of their projects. The real sensation was caused by the 111-meter-long Machinery Hall, the largest indoor facility in the world at that time. It was constructed with welded iron, not cast iron as originally planned, sparking lively discussions about the practical and artistic properties of these materials. The press hailed electricity as the queen of this exhibition. Alongside it, a great number of fascinating exhibits were displayed, including textile machines and steam engines. Daimler's automobile and Benz's automobile. The public witnessed a working photo booth for the first time at the exhibition. To facilitate the operation of the event, a special 3-kilometer-long railway was built. Chicago, 1893. One of the most monumental events in history was the World's Columbian Exposition, held in Chicago in 1893. On the marshy shores of Lake Michigan, over an area of 600 acres, they built nearly 200 stunning buildings as part of preparation for the exhibition. They used specially treated, white plastered wood for construction, and on top of that, they built 19 national pavilions and 24 pavilions representing American states, along with canals and lagoons. The area featured an elevated railway, moving sidewalks, lift-up fountains, a giant Ferris wheel, an ice mountain, and an entire street of pleasures, with theaters, zoos, and market fairs. The exhibition was a great success, attracting 27 million visitors in just 6 months. The Ferris wheel. If the Eiffel Tower was the hallmark of the Paris exhibition, the Ferris wheel stole the spotlight at this one. Its height reached 80.4 meters, that is 264 feet, with a wheel diameter of 75 meters. The main axle, which supported the wheel, weighed 70 tons, making it the largest forged iron part in the history of humanity at that time. This colossal steel machine was constructed for the opening of the exhibition. It weighed around 2,000 tons and rotated with the help of 2 steam engines, each with a power of 1,000 horsepower. The wheel had 36 cabins attached to its rim, accommodating 20 seated and 40 standing passengers in each. It took a 20-minute ride to complete one full revolution, offering 2,160 passengers at a time stunning views of the exhibition surroundings. The main attraction of the event surpassed any 19th century skyscraper in height, 200,000 light bulbs. Thanks to the efforts of Nikola Tesla and George Westinghouse, the World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago was opened on May 1, 1893, illuminated by a dazzling display of 200,000 electric light bulbs. York Telescope. Another fascinating object was the York Telescope, 20 meters long and weighing 70 tons. The balancing was so precise that it could be moved with a touch of a pointing finger. This was the largest telescope of that time, custom made for the World's Columbian Exposition. The Slavenyov Cup. One of the unique testimonies of progress in welding art was an exhibit called the Slavenyov Cup, named after its inventor, engineer Nikolai Gavrilovich Slavenyov. It was welded from 8 different black and colored metals that were previously considered unconnectable: bronze, nickel, steel, copper, cast iron, bell bronze, tombac, and new silver. Thus, the exhibit demonstrated the possibility of connecting the entire range of technical metals of that time. The Slavenyov Cup astonished the exhibition visitors and remains one of the most convincing pieces of evidence of Slavenyov's highest qualifications as both a scientist and a metallurgist practitioner. Slavenyov received a medal for the produced scientific and technical revolution. It was his method that laid the foundation for all modern welding production. Infrastructure and all the exhibits showcased at the Columbian Exhibition required a significant amount of energy. Specialists took a great interest in the steam engines within the electric power stations supplying the exhibition with energy. Together, they generated no less than 25,000 horsepower, and the total power of the dynamos reached 15,000 kilowatts. In addition to providing electric lighting for the exhibition, the power stations supplied electricity for the Underground Railway, moving sidewalks, boats with electric motors, illuminated fountains, and other purposes. Another world exhibition took place in Paris, France, from April 15th to November 12th, 1900. The exhibition was symbolized by the transition from the 19th century to the new 20th century. Over the course of 7 months, more than 50 million people visited the exhibition, a world record at that time. As the turn of the century approached, electricity had already made its mark. The colossal growth of the means of transportation, ocean-class steamships, railways, electric telegraphs, and the Suez Canal, which opened in 1869, for the first time created truly global market relationships. And in Russia, after the abolition of serfdom in 1861, an actual industrial boom had begun. Dmitry Mendeleev actively participated in the work of the exhibition, serving as the vice president of the international jury. the moving sidewalk. One of the most interesting exhibits at the exhibition was the moving sidewalk, often referred to as the Street of the Future. It was set in motion by electric motors and divided into 3 platforms, one of which remained fixed while the other 2 moved. The first platform operated at a slower speed of 4 kilometers an hour, and the second one moved at 8 kilometers an hour. The sidewalk spanned the entire exhibition, measuring 3.5 kilometers in length, and featuring 9 stations. It was believed that such sidewalks would soon become widely available, but we are still waiting to see them. Today, similar walkways can be found in airports and supermarkets and are called travelators, but they don't match the scale of the sidewalks of that time. Furthermore, the moving sidewalks were located outdoors, unlike modern travelators a mere 100 years ago. A concept that we currently associate with sci-fi movies was successfully implemented and used daily, accommodating up to 70,000 people at its peak. Nowadays, such a mechanism would not be that expensive, but the cost of electricity has risen. It's not from ether after all. At the same World Exhibition, Rudolf Diesel presented a diesel engine running on rapeseed oil. The subsequent fate of Rudolf Diesel is intriguing. He obtained a patent for his new invention, an engine based on self-ignition of the mixture, which achieved the highest efficiency among piston engines, reaching 50%. However, his sensational discovery brought him neither wealth nor fame. The endless patent processes exhausted Rudolf and deprived him of his last savings. And his attempt to start cooperation with England cost him his life. On September 30th, 1913, Diesel boarded a ferry in Antwerp. Despite his financial troubles, he was in high spirits, joking with friends and eagerly sharing stories about his invention with fellow passengers. He then went to his cabin, asked the steward to wake him up in the morning, and vanished. The circumstances surrounding Rudolf Diesel's death remain another mystery in history. Nevertheless, his name forever remains in the term diesel engine. And now, let's return to the World Exhibition. Serbian mathematician Mihailo Petrović was awarded a gold medal for his presented invention of the hydraulic integrator, an analog computing machine. Just think about it. A computing machine existed over 120 years ago. Furthermore, at the exhibition, the Palace of Illusions showcased a refracting telescope at the center of attention. Notably, its lens diameter measured 1.25 meters. This telescope was the largest among all refracting instruments ever constructed at that time. The telescope tube was 60 meters in length and 1.5 meters in diameter. To this day, it remains the largest refracting telescope ever built.
Studying 19th century photographs, one can't help but conclude that humanity took a wrong turn. Or it was turned. The world exhibitions of the 19th century were the brightest events of that era and had a profound influence on the technological and cultural development of society. Such exhibitions began to be held in 1851. Their aim was to unite the efforts of humankind in the movement towards peace, creation, and the progressive future. At that time, it seemed that in about 100 years, people would colonize other planets and travel to distant stars and galaxies. But do we see that today? Have we traveled to distant stars? What went wrong? Let's investigate together. Since the second half of the 19th century, there has been a rapid numerical growth of intellectuals in Europe on the wave of liberalism. Competition for a place under the sun sharply intensified among them. The revolutionary zeal of young, ambitious, and unscrupulous scientists intoxicated by their rapid scholarship and the desire to become famous at any cost, paralyzed not only the representatives of the responsible and honest circle of scientists, but also the entire scientific community. Thus, at the beginning of the 20th century, instead of the method of persuasion, the method of total suppression of one's opponents by means of mental, physical, and moral violence against them broke into the fashion of scientific disputes. As a result, the so-called enlightened intellectuals, in fact, in a violent way changed the true scientific direction to a fierce relativism, giving science the form of the theory of general relativity, or rather, scientific cynicism. All this is in the best traditions of the format of consumer society. Relativism, from the Latin relativus, relative, is a philosophical doctrine that asserts that all knowledge is relative and that there is no absolute truth, only truths believed by specific individuals or cultures. It is the view that truth and falsity, right and wrong, standards of reasoning and procedures of justification are products of differing conventions and frameworks of assessment, and that their authority is confined to the context giving rise to them. A synonym for the word relativism is relativity.
That's when on the horizon of the scientific community emerged an unheard of young physicist, Albert Einstein, an employee of a certain patent office, a citizen of Switzerland. It seems that we know everything about Einstein. One could say that his fame during his lifetime was unprecedented for a scientist of that era. But what do we know about this widely publicized 20th century scientist? In his childhood and youth, there were no signs of his genius. According to accounts from contemporaries, the scientist had difficulty interacting with other people. He performed poorly in school and had trouble expressing his thoughts. Due to his reluctance to socialize, Einstein found it challenging to work with others. And what's more, he couldn't stand physical contact. Scientist Temple Grandin, in her book, Thinking in Pictures, claims that Einstein's genius was a result of autistic traits, and he didn't speak until he was 3 years old. In scientific circles, it is known that Einstein did not establish his scientific school. He didn't give lectures to students, and he didn't have any graduate students. From archival documents, it is known that after Einstein was elected to the Berlin Academy of Sciences, for several initial years, he worked there not as a specialist in theoretical physics, but rather as an expert in aviation technology, probably based on his experience at the patent office. Working at the Bern Patent Office since 1902, Einstein had access to a wealth of the newest and most up-to-date scientific information, accumulated and utilized the cutting-edge knowledge of other scientists. He formulated his special theory of relativity in 1905, but he didn't start from scratch. He took basic ideas from the French physicist Poincare and borrowed the mathematical apparatus from Lorentz. In his work, Einstein did not make a single reference, thus presenting others' discoveries as his own. Poincare, upon meeting Einstein once, accused him of plagiarism and scientific dishonesty.
A little earlier, in 1897, the first Zionist Congress was held in Basel, which urgently needed to raise some banner. It was necessary to create and inflate the cult of some brilliant personality, a genius of all times and one nation. Einstein was just the right person for such a role, in which they invested money and promoted his name to unprecedented heights. Thus, in 1905, the 26-year-old Einstein declared that the ether does not exist in principle and presented his theory of relativity to the world. Einstein's followers took a dominant position in science. It is indicative that any experiments supporting the existence of the ether or challenging the theory of relativity were harshly rejected and continue to be rejected by this academic school.
It was precisely in 1905 that a deliberate destruction of the ether theory began in the scientific community. As a result of a secret conspiracy among global industrialists and magnates, a series of figures were urgently put forward to the prestigious scientific Olympus of worldwide significance. They were then promoted all over the world, and in turn, they started replacing the concept of the ether and diverting physics into a completely different direction of research. Publishing his works on the topical issues of the time, Einstein began to expound on the theory of relativity. Skillfully, he managed to steer the scientific worldview in another direction. His patrons promptly popularized and presented his works as independent theories. In these scientific works, the notion of the ether was completely abolished due to lack of necessity. An upheaval began to take place in the scientific world. Scientists were cleverly pitted against each other, preventing them from reaching a common opinion. And in 1920, during the Congress of the Union of German Natural Scientists and Physicians held in Germany, the concept of ether was officially abolished in science. All these facts point to a sabotage in science, obstructing the discovery of free and no-cost ether energy for all of humanity.
Do you know why Einstein won the Nobel Prize? The logical assumption would be that it was for the theory of relativity. But no. Many scientists on the Nobel Committee understood that there was actually nothing to give the prize for, especially since everyone remembered the scandalous history of his lobbying. There was a whole year of fierce debate before the award was presented, and in the end, the organizers went to the trick. In 1922, Einstein was awarded the prize for his work on the photoelectric effect, even though he had nothing to do with this discovery. Anyway, Alexander Grigorievich Stoletov, who was the first to discover the photoelectric effect and described its 3 laws, couldn't protest. By that time, he had long passed away. It's indicative that Einstein himself was not present at the award ceremony. The true intentions of the creators of the world scientific celebrity became clear later, when all research on the ether was shut down. At the same time, since the middle of the 20s of the 20th century, a large-scale discrediting of the ether as one of the basic concepts of theoretical physics began in the world media, and physicists who even mentioned the ether in conversation with colleagues were unquestionably labeled as pseudoscientists, even if they were right in their conclusions 1,000 times over. From that time on, the theory of relativity became the standard of correctness for any other theories, which must in no way contradict Einstein's theory. The restrictions reached absurdity. In 1964, in the USSR adopted a special resolution of the Academy of Sciences to equate any criticism of Einstein's theory of relativity to the invention of perpetual motion machine, to explain the authors their misconceptions, and not to allow any criticism of the theory of relativity in the press, because it is anti-scientific. A revealing detail in the whole story is the fact that the manuscript of the main work on the special theory of relativity, on the electrodynamics of moving bodies, was lost immediately after publication. Is this why it was lost? Because it also contained the signature of Einstein's wife?
There is an opinion, and it's not without its grounds, that the theory of relativity was actually written by Einstein's first wife, Mileva Maric. There's a saying, "Behind every great man, there's a great woman." Soviet academician Yoffe recalled seeing the original articles from 1905 from both Mileva's and Albert's names, but unfortunately, those originals were not preserved, and Mileva couldn't prove anything or didn't seem to make much effort to do so. Mileva Maric Einstein's story remained hidden until Einstein's grandchildren disclosed a collection of love letters exchanged between her and the great physicist. From the correspondence, we learn that Einstein imposed several humiliating conditions on his future wife, and one of those conditions was to assist him with scientific calculations. But love turned out to be blind, and Mileva, smitten with Albert, married him. Nonetheless, they divorced in 1919. The divorce documents of Einstein and Maric are now kept in Israel and classified. Witnesses of the divorce process remember that some very unpleasant facts were revealed during the proceedings, including multiple instances of physical abuse from Einstein. This is the full version of the most recognizable photograph of Albert Einstein, which became a symbol of a genius who knows how to enjoy life, and the story of its emergence stands as a symbol of journalistic luck. Einstein himself liked the photograph, cropping it to the now familiar professor's head, and then sending it as a postcard to his friends. He wrote to one of them, "This gesture you will like, because it is aimed at all of humanity."
This is how an electric power station, capable of meeting all the energy needs of your home, might look like. Such a power station would be able to provide year-round heating for a greenhouse at your summer plot illumination and heating for your living space at any time of day or season. It could serve as a source of heat and light in a tourist or geological tent. Of course, it could replace gasoline or diesel engines in cars, eliminating the need to ever visit gas stations. This power station was created by Moscow inventor Yevgeny Papushin, a mechanical engineer and graduate of the Bauman Moscow State Technical University, and a member of the Moscow Aviation Institute. Furthermore, Papushin has developed an apparatus that can replace a rocket engine. This opens up truly space-age prospects, since one of the main challenges in the modern space exploration is the incredible cost of delivering rocket fuel to orbit and its rapid consumption during flight. Numerous attempts of the inventor to appeal to the state's structures resulted in nothing. His first installation was stolen, the second was destroyed, and funding for the third one was frozen. From the experience of other scientists, we can say that Papushin got off pretty easily. Many of those scientists who tried to resist imposed scientific dogmas, and those who simply stood up for their right to different views, sometimes paid the highest price, their own life.
There's an almost detective-like story about a Portuguese man, John Andrews, who invented fuel for the internal combustion engine by adding a few drops of simple and inexpensive chemicals to a bucket of regular water. This fuel was tested by a special government commission on a car traveling from New York to Washington and back. Following the successful test, one of the largest U.S. oil monopolies bought the documentation and rights to this invention from Andrews for $2 million, and then buried them in their safes. Andrews himself mysteriously disappeared just 2 days after receiving the money. The authenticity of this water-based fuel invention was confirmed by several publications. In Russia, the Russian scientist Mikhail Filippov worked on the problem of wireless energy transmission. He spent several years developing a system for transmitting electricity through the air. As a result, while in St. Petersburg, he managed to light a chandelier in the Tsarskoye Selo from a distance of 30 kilometers. Mikhail Mikhailovich was a unique all-around scientist, PhD in mathematics, physics, chemistry, philosophy. In the summer of 1903, he was found dead in his home laboratory. Filippov's documents and apparatus were seized and are considered lost. Even Nikola Tesla, one of the first scientists nominated for the Nobel Prize, couldn't avoid losing the cause of his entire life. At the behest of Tesla's sponsor, Morgan, all installations and the Wardenclyffe Tower on Long Island were destroyed, as he realized that if given the chance, humanity would never again need organic fuels. And so, since then, the world has been searching for energy. In the 1960s, Stanley Meyer invented and patented a device that could generate energy from water instead of petroleum-based fuels. He called it the water fuel cell. By the mid-70s, the price of crude oil in the global market had tripled, and oil prices in the USA were increasing every day. The prospect of losing the oil market due to Meyer's invention meant catastrophe for the oil magnates. As a result, he faced pressure from the government, being accused of fraud and subjected to ostracism. On March 20th, 1998, Meyer met with 2 Belgian investors at the Cracker Barrel restaurant, where his brother, Stephen Meyer, was also present. During the meal, they were all eating toast when suddenly Meyer rushed outside, clutching his throat. He only managed to tell his brother that he had been poisoned.
In the next story, we wanted to tell you about Jean Morsol, a French inventor, but unfortunately, the purifiers of science did an excellent job. There is not a single photograph of Morsol left in the public domain. However, it is essential to share his story because it serves as an example of how the consumerist format deals with those who stand in its way. Jean Morsol patented his molecular internal combustion engine in the 1950s. It ran on water, zinc, and antimony. In fact, it was a hydrogen engine where a mixture of hydrogen and oxygen was produced through the catalytic decomposition of water. The inventor's work on the engine was discontinued under the pressure of transnational oil monopolies. After all, if instead of gasoline and diesel fuel, car engines began to run on water, the monopolies would have lost their well-established business and immense profit. Immediately after filing the patent application for the molecular engine, Jean Morsol, along with his wife, mother-in-law, and 4 children, tragically died in a car accident. That same night, a sudden fire broke out in his laboratory, destroying everything to the ground. 3 days later, the first wife of Morsol died under a train, and shortly after, the inventor's father passed away unexpectedly. Military investigators seized the remaining manuscripts and documents. The fate of the laboratory employees remains unknown.
In 1972, Richard Clem from Texas, USA, was working with equipment that sprayed and pumped liquid asphalt. He noticed that the asphalt cone pump continued to operate for up to 30 minutes after the power was turned off. This discovery led to the creation of a fuelless motor. Richard Clem claimed that the motor didn't require fuel, only the oil needed to be changed every 150,000 miles. a large coal company offered financial support to Clem and signed a contract to purchase the motor. However, shortly after signing the documents, Richard died of a heart attack. Why did the coal company show interest in his motor if they hadn't bought the patent for the fuelless motor? Not only conventional motors, but also the fuel itself, coal, oil, gas, including the coal company itself, would have become unnecessary for the world at that time. Albert Victor Iosifovich Vanek, 1919 to 1996. Doctor of Engineering, Professor, and corresponding member of the Academy of Science of the Belarusian SSR. He is known worldwide as one of the founders of the theory of heat and mass transfer, and the thermophysics of casting processes. His profound analysis of the foundation of traditional thermodynamics and numerous experiments led to the creation of the thermodynamics of real processes. This new thermodynamics offered a fresh perspective on axioms and demonstrated the fallacies in Einstein's theory of relativity. Vanek's developments in the field of propellantless motion had the potential to revolutionize all fuel technologies. He wrote, "I am aware that many enthusiasts attempting to create a propellantless vehicle capable of flying experiment with rotating various bodies, devising the most intricate motions to their crafty devices, etc., in an attempt to circumvent Newton's laws of mechanics. Whole institutes are engaged in this. However, I must immediately disappoint all these enthusiasts. It is fundamentally impossible to trick Newton's mechanics. There is only one way to achieve what they desire: to influence the course of time, as God has not provided any other way." Vanek encapsulated his ideas in the book Technical Thermodynamics and Fundamentals of Heat Transfer. In the summer of 1968, the famous third edition of Vanek's book, Thermodynamics, appeared on store shelves. In it, he presented the idea of the existence of elementary forms of matter movement, considered as elementary particles, bricks of motion. The scientific mafia confiscated Vanek's works, in particular, A Word of Praise for Entropy, where he satirically criticized Einstein's theory of relativity and the theory of motion, which presented his new theory, were seized from the printing house and destroyed. His thermodynamics was removed from bookstores and burned at the stake. In a letter to the newspaper Komsomolskaya Pravda, Vanek wrote, "I want to draw the attention of the editorial staff and readers to the fact that the existence of superluminal speeds and the variability of the speed of light in a vacuum is a firmly established scientific fact. This refutes Einstein's myth of the invariability and constancy of the speed of light." His scientific interests were extremely diverse, ranging from casting processes, the fundamentals of space and time, to the relationship between science and religion. He was a scientist, philosopher, a bright and extraordinary personality who left a legacy of honor. Advocates of the Standard Model and similar orthodoxies vehemently reject Vanek's theory. The absurdity of the situation was that Vanek was subjected to psychiatric evaluations. He described the events of March 1973 as follows. Once, it happened on March 20th, 1973. They even burned down my laboratory, workshop, and the party organs, although I am not a party member, declared me guilty as they don't look for the guilty. They appoint them and imposed the obligation to pay for the repairs of the burnt premises. In a letter from A.I. Vanek to S.G. Smirnov, according to my records, you are not familiar with Books of Sorrows, so I am sending it to you. Perhaps someday it will be in demand, but for now, it's yours. It is, to some extent, autobiographical. Therefore, when I first presented it in Alma-Ata, naively, as far away from Minsk as possible, the effect was such that if I show it to anyone else, the same fate awaits me, as with the poet, I believe, Nekrasov, whose remains were spread over 15 meters on a wall by a car bumper in Paris, or with the pilot who flew away with the MiG to Japan. His remains were spread over 25 meters in Brazil, and I would be spread over 50 meters. After that, I came home, took all my savings, and in Kunis I made dozens of photocopies among friends, traveled to different cities, and handed them out to various people, so that there would be some trace left after being spread. I encountered the right person in Alma-Ata from the very beginning. Then, and before that, they were always on my heels, promising that I would die in 2 months. My copies multiplied like fruit flies. Now, there are hundreds of them.
On November 24, 1996, at 6 o'clock in the morning, Veinik was hurrying to the early liturgy. On Oktyabrskaya Square in Minsk, he was hit by a car. Then a second car completed the tragedy. It would seem that the facts confirm the accidental nature of the incident, but a month before Veinik's death, his life was attempted under similar circumstances. A car deliberately tried to run him down. Miraculously, he paused, and the car, swerving towards him, hit him slightly. Veinik, Papushin, Filimonenko. Those we've mentioned here are only a small part of the known scientists, and how many geniuses who could have been of great benefit to humankind simply disappeared without ever hitting the press outlets. The consumerist format has desperately resisted humanity's desire for the knowledge of truth, sweeping away the best and brightest personalities from its way.
Inventors create a prototype, patent it, and make announcements in the press, after which the technology mysteriously disappears somewhere, and only occasionally reliable information is received about how this happens, how these emerging technologies are being closed off. And it happens this way. A phone call. Young men appear, not always in black, sometimes in gray suits, always well-dressed, very polite, and with very serious facial expressions. After that, inventors or developers are made offers which, as a rule, they cannot refuse. In really rare cases, when the inventor is very lucky, they receive a more or less substantial sum, approximately $1 million, deposited into their account. These are the rarest cases. In most cases, the offers are not as tempting and much less pleasant. These are threats to their family, threats to the person themselves, or simply a demand to sign some documents, after which the development is taken away for them forever, and they remain forever silent. I will not list all these names because the list, believe me, is very long. I even received some confidential messages that by talking about these technologies, Andrei, you are actually risking a lot. This was said by people directly involved in these very secret services.
We observe the halt of progress, not only in science, but also in art. In the second half of the 20th century, modern people stopped dreaming about space flights, visiting other worlds, time travel, breakthrough discoveries, and a happy future of humanity in a society of harmony and creation. Nowadays, mass culture mainly operates with negative and destructive plots, programming us for the outcome the world authorities expect. What do you think they expect, and why do they act this way? But it doesn't end with mass culture. In the consumerist format, all means are involved: viruses, wars, hunger. It's a working scheme after the implementation of which not only people's lives are destroyed, but also the technologies that give life and freedom.
It did stop them, of course. Many scientific developments were definitely halted. This is 100%. In particular, everything. And not only could, but they actually did vanish. Why? Who's an engineer? Who's an inventor? It's either an individual or a group of 2 or 3 people, and often only one of them really knows something. When millions of boys are called up to the army and they die, There are not just human bodies lying on the battlefield. Let's ponder. There are brilliant discoveries, fundamental scientific inventions. There are absolutely amazing philosophical treatises and artistic works that no one will write or create anymore. And the First World War led to the death of a huge number of young men. I understand that feminists will bark at me for these words, but it's precisely young men who are the gene pool of the future humanity. While middle-aged and elderly men are those who make breakthroughs possible, it takes a long time to bring up an inventor as scientist. Remember an amazing episode in Yefremov's Starships, where an old scientist discovers a tank in which his disciple died and extracts a folder containing unique, amazing calculations and drawings. The young man took them to the front line and never returned. It's a fairy tale, a science fiction, a work of art. Yet, there is a reality behind such works. A perished inventor is not a fairy tale. And just not on the front line. They don't have any money to pay him. We're doing an important job. We're defeating the enemy, while you asking for money for some trivial things. Look at you. Go sweep the streets, help the defenders of the homeland. And the person dies of hunger, or stops his interesting and significant research. This happens at every step of any war. Moreover, the wars of the past were not waged with such intensity and cruelty. They did not involve so many people, but started from the Franco-Prussian War, and especially the First World War. They did involve them. Hundreds of thousands and millions of young men, a sharp decline in the economy, the entire economy, with all the ensuing consequences.
And all this happens due to our tacit consent. In addition to wars, progress is also hindered by our unwillingness to learn new things. Learned helplessness syndrome, omniscience, laziness, greed, slave psychology and thinking. All these are the reasons why human beings do not develop but degrade in the consumerist format of society. As we can see, evil exists within each of us. We shift responsibility onto the government, blame politicians and everyone we can. Yet, we ourselves are not interested in developing the technologies that could set us free. As the saying goes, in the search for enemies, the main thing is not to stumble upon ourselves. Because each of us has mindsets that stop us and prevent us from moving forward in our development. It's quite simple. The responsibility lies with each of us, and our future doesn't depend on some authorities. Friends won't save us, because friends are we. And it is only up to us to determine what our future will be like.
Born against your will in a world of death and deceitful dreams. Who are you, a fledgling trapped in a cage, enduring so much sorrows and tears? For whom do you live and what do you breathe? How many precious years and moments have you sold yourself into boundaries do you hear? For those who hold the carrot and the whip, look at yourself, what do you see? Either what you once dreamed of, or human the mountain, hustle him not, squander your potential. Have the sweetness of freedom be forgotten, lost in web of cheap pretenses? Have your heart learned to love in the emptiness of endless dreams? Start the chains of the cynical society. Remember who you are, what your purpose is. While there's a glimmer of dignity within you, awaken so the hell does not dwell in you. Everyone feels that something not right when stuck in the hellish wheel. With our own hands we created it, that we could have lived in paradise. Having lost our humanity, we lost ourselves, and for the last 6,000 years we've been destroying, suffering, losing our souls, hiding under the darkness of ignorance. Born against your will in a world of death, deceitful dreams. Are you a fledgling trapped in a cage, enduring so much sorrows and tears? Why have we created good and useful things for ourselves, for king, for children, for the careless murder of fellow human beings. Technologies now serve as the instant. For heavy days, the lives long ago, giving walls light and comfort. This is why it concealed and tossed to the dogs, while we're left with the mere bones. We fight for the light's favors, ready to devour each other. Yet as long as conscience doesn't fall silent within, we can peacefully sleep. Oh, human, don't extinguish the spark of your soul. Preserve, multiply the gifts. Hasten to warm out with love. Illuminate planet Earth with it. Let the unity of hearts resonate. Let goodness beget more goodness. By casting away the frown of suffering, together we'll tame the core of the planet. So maybe significant for now, amidst the infinity of stellar systems. When untied, we already ain't but separate. We see aids to exist. Build unified and free world. Reach the boundaries of the universe. Invite the alienated to faster friendship of our planet where no green faces well. Without lies, evil, cruelty, inequality, knowledge and love. Must speed rate and the speed of light, and happiness will spark within everyone. Replicators we will receive all we need for our bodies. In our world, dictators we see aids to exist. The fate of slaves will become a thing of the past. Rules will become our law, and God's law will be our reward. And we shall never forget who we are. If you human are ready, 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 hey.
This is our present. Now imagine what our future will be like when progressive technologies start to integrate into everyday life. In the future, new capabilities inherent in humans will be continuously discovered. Imagine being able to teleport to any point in the universe. And we'll not only possess telekinesis, but also the power of thought in all its manifestations. Imagine a world where free energy won't be something supernatural and unreal. Even now, some inventors have working fuel-free generators. In the future, these generators will not only be in every factory, but also in every home and every vehicle.
One of the most frequently asked questions I get is, Andre, tell me, where are these fuel-free technologies? How many are there? Why don't they pave their own way? After all, once they appear on the horizon, of course, businesses will immediately grab hold of them. Well, you see, friends, the number of these technologies, according to Patrick Kelly's compendium, is approximately 160 plus. It's important to consider that Kelly's compendium covers a period of about 20 years. This is the end of the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st century. It means it's far from being complete. Moreover, these technologies can be divided into groups: the use of centrifugal forces, the use of electricity, magnetic and gravitational energy. Well, whatever you want. In fact, it's quite challenging to even structure them due to their significant diversity. And all this diversity appeared not over a very long period of time. Most of them emerged in the second half of the 20th century, but their fate is more or less the same.
First of all these devices are characterized by, not just energy, not just motion. There is actually a whole complex of technologies, including in medicine, in material science and engineering. When you can change materials. Years ago, when we all lived in the Soviet Union, significant work was done in Ukraine. To be more precise, in Lviv, to research new methods in metallurgy, changing the properties of metals under the influence of torsion field generators. There were remarkable achievements. For instance, they melted metal and, in the molten state, it was exposed to a torsion generator for several minutes. The structure of the metal changed. And all of this was confirmed in many places. And now it is confirmed everywhere in Russia. There are all the documents, there is everything. Nevertheless, the technologies aren't being implemented. Good quality metal can be produced with relatively low costs. But it all is at the standstill for the same reasons why we do not yet have new sources of energy, why we do not develop new types of transportation that can fly in space without a rocket engine. There are already such devices. And the fact that we constantly see several unidentified flying objects every day in all countries is not surprising. Apparently, there are conscious beings that have this knowledge and have been using it for a long time, while some bad guys simply don't let us implement it on Earth. After all, we depend heavily on energy. I mean, here in Russia, energy prices are growing very fast, and the same is happening worldwide. How can an ordinary person pay for all these energy resources? They have to work a lot. That's why, of course, this will make people free. And a free person will have more opportunities for a normal life, for using their time for more useful things, such as leisure, tourism, providing themselves and their family with necessary resources. If people start to do real work, that is, stop making money, and develop science and knowledge already in the post-technological stage of development, then their life will become beautiful. Because a lot can be changed then. Now, of course, it is difficult to say, but basically, then the human will be able to do everything. Because, well, what the existence outside of metric systems is, what happens there and what will be, we do not know yet. I mean, a human there will become, you could say, omnipotent, and will be able to do almost everything. Bosses and owners will be eliminated. People will live as a collective and solve different problems to provide for daily life and for the further development of the mind, in search of further development of human civilization and its intelligence. While the material part will be fully provided, and that's why the development will go in new, very interesting directions. In other words, we will get rid of what people strive for today, only money, while interests and search will be much more ambitious, exciting, and effective. Naturally, when the human is born, he is looking for something to do, he is thinking, and if his material needs are met, so to speak, then he is engaged only in what is closest to him, what is interesting to him.
Well, you know, first and foremost, we will get freedom from need. We will have opportunities for the development of each and every one of us, and we will be free from the most powerful lever of control and coercion, which is the manipulation of scarce energy resources. With energy freedom, we will simply begin a new life. Opportunities will open up, not only for economic prosperity, but in particular for the conquest of the solar system. And these opportunities, these technologies already exist today. I'll tell you even more. There are already several companies that have brought their devices to the level of commercial use and are just waiting for the opportunity to produce clean electricity without any harmful emissions, radiation, and completely fuel-free. Hundreds, even terawatts. Moreover, there are technologies that allow us to provide each and every household with a compact source of electricity that can fit, roughly speaking, into your socket. And lastly, there are technologies that will simply allow us to easily fly to Mars in a week. Not just one way, like Elon Musk, but to have a round trip.
At the current stage of development, humanity hasn't yet freed itself from its animal legacy. As long as we wage wars and produce weapons of ever-increasing destructive power, deep knowledge about alternative forms of energy is unlikely to be made available to us. And this is probably for our good. We don't give a dangerous tool to our child until they grow up and become conscious enough to use it for their benefit and without harming themselves. In a sense, the human race are still unconscious children, and demiurgic forces protect us from causing irreversible harm to ourselves and the planet. Before working with such powerful and potentially dangerous energies, we must at least learn to live in peace with each other.
Once again, science has picked up tremendous speed. Just a little more, and it will cross the red lines that were drawn for it 100 years ago. Right now, the same story that halted progress in the early 20th century is repeating itself in a well-established pattern. Epidemic, war, famine. Today, few people consider these three phenomena as a unified and most effective weapon used by those who seek total power. This triad has appeared throughout history since ancient times. Today, it is still used to break people's will, impose values that are foreign to them, destroy entire nations, and gain the ability to manipulate millions of people.
639 AD. The Prophet never led conquering wars. However, right after his departure, the first caliphs, Abu Bakr and Umar, started using Islam to create an empire. Abu Bakr and Umar unleashed murderous wars of conquest. True Muslims, faithful to the Prophet Muhammad, those who dedicated their lives to serving Allah, were deeply dissatisfied with such actions of the new caliphs. And, at that time, there was a widespread outbreak of plague. It started in the district of Amwas, near Jerusalem, and then spread throughout Palestine and Syria. In the military camp of the small town of Amwas, by the year 639, only 4,000 Muslim warriors remained out of 24,000. Almost all the top army commanders who knew the Quran and fought alongside the Prophet himself perished. The plague wiped out everyone who carried the idea and the knowledge. This allowed Umar, who betrayed the Prophet's commandments, to put the people he needed at the head of the army. Immediately after the plague, an artificially created famine began. Due to the drought, there was a real problem with the harvest, but Umar prohibited making reserves and personally distributed the food brought by the caravans. He clearly understood what he was doing, using starvation to suppress people after the war, making them think more about a piece of bread rather than the truth. Umar destroyed most of the people who could make any resistance and break the rest. It was an ideological act. Umar and his associates changed the worldview of a huge number of people. The consequences of this we still see to this day. 1918 AD. During the First World War, an epidemic of a mysterious flu called Spanish flu claimed the lives of about 100 million people. This exceeded the losses in the First and Second World Wars. 2 to 3 years later, after reaping its harvest, the Spanish flu disappeared, and the source of the flu was never found. However, there is no doubt that the First World War played a significant role in the spread and evolution of the virus. Doctors know very well that during military actions, more soldiers die from diseases than on the battlefield. This is because not only war, but also the movement of troops and civilian populations contribute to the spread of epidemics. And then, mass starvation followed. 2020 AD. 100 years after the deadliest flu epidemic in history, the Spanish flu, humanity once again faced a high-tension virus threat. On March 11, 2020, the World Health Organization declared the beginning of a global pandemic caused by a new strain of coronavirus, or COVID-19. By the most modest estimates of the WHO since the onset of the coronavirus attack, the disease has claimed the lives of at least 20 million people worldwide. Millions have suffered and continue to suffer from post-COVID syndrome and exacerbations of chronic diseases triggered by COVID. Right now, through mass media, humanity is being deliberately prepared for an upcoming famine.
The results of using the ominous triad of epidemic, war, and famine have always been the same: impoverishment, mass casualties, people's fear for their lives, and subservience of humanity to a few individuals. Currently, we are witnessing the unfolding of the second phase of this scheme in modern realities. When it's over, the restrictions will be escalated to a new high-tech level. Some of you might say, well, we've been through this before, we'll go over it again. The problem in this whole story is that there is no time left for humanity on planet Earth to implement the epidemic, war, famine triad once more. This will be our final point. Climate change will mark the end. In order to ascend to the next stage of development, humanity must become free. Only the liberated science of a united humanity can stop the cataclysms. It's up to each of us now. We have the way out.
The creative society, this model, allows humanity to evolve in its development, both technologically and spiritually. The creative society, it's a format that awakens faith in oneself among people, ensures safety for all, provides equality, justice, as well as a dignified future for every individual on our planet and for human civilization as a whole.
For several years, we have been informing about the creative society. The most frequent question we hear is, what will my life be like in the creative society? Friends, it's time to answer this question that concerns all of us. Make yourselves comfortable. We invite you to a wonderful world where the most valuable thing is human life. Your life. Living conditions, everyday life. Already in the transition period from the consumerist format of society to the creative one, each person will immediately be provided with accommodation of at least 60 square meters for a comfortable life. If you have a family of 5, you will live in a house or apartment of 300 square meters. This housing will be your property. It will not be subject to taxes and utility bills. As your family grows, your living space will expand. A consumer paradise will be created. The availability of free time, money, and a variety of quality goods and accessible products. And this is already in the transition period from a consumerist format to the creative society. Financial freedom. People will become financially independent starting from their birth. From the first day of the transition period to the creative society, all mortgages and loans will be written off. No more inflation. Prices for the same product or services will be the same all over the world. No more taxes on small and medium-sized businesses. No more taxes on individuals. You will receive a universal basic income of $10,000 every month. There will be no need to work in order to have a roof over your head and feed your family. In the creative society, you will always have confidence in your future. Do you want more money? There will be an opportunity to work doing what you love to do. Only 4 hours a day, 4 days a week. You will have a vacation at least 2 months a year. Do you want to work more because you get a buzz out of doing your job benefiting society? Go for it. You are always free to choose. All hard, dangerous, harmful, and monotonous work will be done by robots and automated systems. A human is not a slave to toil from morning till night for a penny. You will have time for yourself. You will be able to do things you really care about. Spend time with people you love. Develop yourself. Be creative. And travel to any part of the world without visas or restrictions. In the creative society, every day of your life brings only joy and pleasure. Environment. Production will be waste-free and completely environmentally friendly. Pesticides and chemicals will no longer be needed to grow products. Only tasty, healthy, and varied foods will always be on your table. You will be able to enjoy clean, fresh air wherever you go. You will be able to drink crystal clear water saturated with good microelements and minerals. In the creative society, we will restore the ecosystem of the planet, and we will be able to admire the purity of oceans and the beauty of pristine forests. The creative society is a world of harmony and beauty. Healthcare. Perfect health of every person is one of the priorities of the creative society. From the very beginning of the transition period, medical care will be free for everyone. Doctors will be paid for healthy patients. A patient will no longer be seen as a profitable client. Each medical center will be equipped with artificial intelligence that will incorporate the experience of all the best doctors in the world throughout history. The very approach in healthcare will change. It will become 90% preventative. And all this right away in the transition period. Now, in the creative society, new technologies will allow humanity to never get sick. Everyone will have an opportunity to significantly increase their lifespan. To date, these technologies are already being developed, but the consumerist format makes them inaccessible for us. A simple device installed in the shower cubicle will scan your body and will adjust your appearance according to your wishes. In the creative society, you'll be really healthy, completely free of charge. Education. You deserve a decent, high quality, and free education. Do you like to study? In the creative society, you can get as many degrees as you want. And you won't have to worry about earning a living because you'll have a universal basic income. From the first days of the transition period to the creative society, you can easily acquire a new profession if you wish to. Artificial intelligence will create an adaptive educational program for you according to your peculiarities. You can study anywhere in the world and at a time that suits you. The creative society is a world of knowledgeable and versatile personalities. Freedom. People will decide for themselves what rules and laws to live by and implement their decisions through voting on a unified platform. The highest value is human life. Everything will be built around a fundamental basis. The world's media will no longer be in private hands, but will belong to society as a whole. This means that they will no longer be able to manipulate public opinion for the profit of a few. The media will truthfully and holistically inform, educate, and inspire people. Safety. Already, in the transition period from the consumerist format to the creative society, the fate of people will no longer depend on the decisions made by a few individuals and on what those in power will agree among themselves. Society will create conditions in which wars, murder, theft, slavery, human trafficking, and drug trade will be impossible. Crime will completely disappear. The latest technologies will be implemented everywhere, which will help the Unified Emergency Service to work proactively to prevent accidents and crimes. You can easily let your child go to school or outside being completely sure about his safety. You'll be safe and secure at all times of day and night while returning home in the evening, going for a walk in the park, or going to a concert. The main danger, the threat of a global climate catastrophe, will be solved. Humanity will never again be threatened by climate disasters and wars. In the creative society, you and your family will be safe anywhere in the world. You will get all this starting from the first days of the transition period. And already, in the creative society, thanks to a replicator technology, you will be able to get everything you need. All kinds of food, clothes, household items, and much more. As fantastic as it may sound, most of the technologies we're talking about already exist. It's just that it's impossible to use them in a consumerist format. Beginning with the transition period, science and technology will be aimed at improving the quality of human life. Life must bring only joy and pleasure. The whole absurdity is that, despite having all the possibilities to live in the creative society already now, we continue to maintain the consumerist format. We can build the creative society peacefully, without struggle or confrontation, in the shortest possible time. There will be no more revolutions, except scientific and technological ones, which will be a permanent and natural phenomenon in the creative society. Tell your family, friends, neighbors, and acquaintances about this perspective. Share how beneficial and cool the creative society is for them. You and I are living in an amazing time, when within a short time we can move from the slave system of the consumerist format to the free and safe world of the creative society. Everything depends on you. If you want such a life, support the creative society and tell everyone about it.